The dungeons at the Special Investigations Unit hide in plain sight across the desultory slums of Chireka, occasionally sticking out like a sore thumb in numerous human rights reports. A 2023 study on militarization and military capture of policing in Uganda, undertaken by the Network of Public Interest Lawyers, provides granular details of this Chireka facility and how it has turned into a symbol of systematic violation of citizen rights. The report identifies that the premises on which the Chireka SIU unit is based houses a police station and a separate structure which is occupied and controlled by the chieftains of military intelligence and which is separated from the rest of the premises by a barrier. The study suggests that the police presence at the premises appears ceremonial and is deceptive to shadow the CMI's authority and control over the detention facility. The facility works as a clearinghouse for persons arrested, unlawfully detained and tortured under the oversight of CMI and the Uganda Police Force's Directorate of Crime Intelligence, including profiled Muslims and rival political opponents. The study, which serves as a cautionary tale, found military capture of the police rather than the militarization on its own to be largely responsible for enacting political policing, which in turn has perpetrated egregious human rights violations in the areas of crowd control and riot control, amongst others.
What is factual is that we are the only army with a Directorate of Human Rights, headed by professional lawyers. We do receive human rights training, both internal and the external facilitators. We have charged officers and men and sentenced them to death for being involved in violation of human rights, especially if it involves murder. We have had cases where our own soldiers, right, are even accused unfairly, and we take action against them, only to find that this was not true.
Police officers fall within the category of street-level bureaucrats, which occurs typically outside of a war context. They are obliged by law and training to apply human rights law standards in regard to the use of force. These standards require minimum force and the use of firearms as a last resort and only when absolutely necessary in self-defense and to protect life and property. By contrast, military personnel typically operate under international humanitarian law principles on the use of force which permit direct targeting of combatants.
I'm sure the army is doing their work very well within the military system. And I know the police may be having problems on whatever the gaps they have. Government should not think that the gaps in the police can be filled by deploying the soldiers. The army have got a different doctrine, and the police, their doctrine is different. I was giving an example that if you have lions, lions cannot bring up leopards. Neither leopards cannot bring up lions.
The militarist ideology operates with an us versus them dichotomy, which has little to no room for dialogue or civic engagement, the study observes.
There might be cases where the army has to come in emergency times, etc., for instance. But it is an issue to have army officers in an unprincipled manner doing things that police should be doing. But I think it's also important to not to absolve the police itself, not to start from a presumption that the police by its nature is okay, because all the facts in Uganda point to a history of the police not being okay, being as bad as, if not in some cases even worse than the army etc. So that there's something more structural, more, again, the original sin, there's just something that goes to the core, to the soul of these security forces, not just in Uganda, but all over Africa and the colonial world, that has to be addressed, that goes even to the structure of the state. And it's linked to how whether they understand the link between the idea of a citizen and the state and how that is conceptualized. If they don't see the person protesting as a citizen who has legitimate rights, they might rough him up.
For us, we started when there were no computers. I saw the computers when I think I'd served for over 10 years in the police. But the first thing they told us that if you put garbage in, expect garbage out. So initially, if you get these fellows into the institution and you are training them in thousands, I think a moderate classroom should be around 24, 30, okay, maximum. So that there is a feedback from the trainer and the trainee.
Military capture of the police in post-colonial Uganda first manifested largely defined by the margins of policing during the colonial legacy. The height of this state of affairs was symbolized by the creation of the General Service Unit by Uganda's first Prime Minister, Apollo Milton Obote, and later during Idi Amin's reign of terror, where the dreaded State Research Bureau and the Public Safety Unit placed government under the clutches of military capture. The 1995 Constitution appeared to restore sanity by streamlining the roles of the key institutions of security and coercion. Under Article 212 of the Constitution, the Uganda Police is accorded the functions to protect life and to protect and to preserve law and order and to prevent and detect crime, amongst others. The Police Act reinforces the command of the IGP over the police force and further establishes two key statutory bodies, namely the Police Authority and the Police Council, whose functions include giving advice on policy and practice, on training, use of firearms, and military roles. The bodies also exercise powers of recruitment, promotions, dismissal, amongst others. The composition of these bodies includes members who can be directly appointed and dismissed by the President's appointees without the oversight and control of the Public Service Commission. This complex yet strategic ambiguity serves as an avenue within the law to facilitate police military capture, the study observes. Under Section 42 of the UPDF Act, UPDF military officers could be called out in aid to the civil power when a riot or a disturbance of the peace occurs or is likely to occur, and in the opinion of the appropriate civil authority, the riot or disturbance of the peace is likely to be beyond the powers of the civil authority to suppress or to prevent. The study's findings suggest that ordinary police recruits now receive military training as part of their regular training, which is a deviation from previous practice. Previously, police recruits were largely trained on the substantive and procedural aspects of criminal law and other relevant aspects of the law, such as road traffic rules and regulations, as well as human rights. Earlier on, efforts to professionalize the police and reduce military influence picked up due to donor influence after the Julius Sebutinde Commission of Inquiry, but quickly regressed when Kizza Besigye, a former Bush war comrade of President Museveni, who served as a junior minister and national political commissar, contested the presidency in 2001 under the reform agenda. Thus, it is within this context that scholars point to the appointment of General Katumba Wamala to the position of the Inspector General of Police just 1 week after the 2001 presidential election, which was meant to realign the force. The study reveals that the militarization went a notch higher under Kale Kaihura's leadership, which was instrumental in violently suppressing protests during his tenure. In addition, the president created a new position of Joint Chief of Staff, which is previously unknown to the police structure, as approved by the Public Service Commission. Combined with the position of IGP and Deputy IGP, the top leadership positions of influence in the Uganda Police Force, which are contract-based, add up to 20, with 6 at the apex headed by military personnel. The membership of the Police Council comprises of a majority of the directors of the newly established directorates, who in turn are also appointed by the President acting upon the advice of the Public Service Commission, but who may also be appointed by the Police Authority and the IGP without any role for the Public Service Commission if the President delegates his powers of appointments. The latter provision circumvents the oversight role of the Public Service Commission and hands control back to the President, as it is he who appoints the IGP as well as all 8 members of the Police Authority, the study observes. This includes the Minister of Internal Affairs, who currently chairs the Police Authority and who is a retired Major General of the UPDF and one of the historical members of the UPDF. Under the new system, the police force recruits its own personnel and then forwards the list of recruits to the Public Service Commission for a ceremonial approval. On the contrary, previous recruitment processes through the Public Service Commission involved bureaucratic checks on civic awareness and aptitude tests. Through the new standards, Kaihura was able to oversee a massive recruitment of young university graduates who were aligned with the NRM ideology.
A crime preventer can give his life for the president, His Excellency. We can kill for the president.
He then set upon a process of rewards through promotions, transfers, and salary scales for loyal recruits at the expense of the old guard who were perceived to be hostile to the NRM ideology.
But to a certain extent, some politicians, and I believe those in the government, they are not civil servants, they are politicians. They are the ones talking about police not having faith. But at the end of the day, a politician is campaigning. He thinks or she thinks that the police should toe his or her line. So at the end of the day, when the police does not do that, then the police has no faith in the government.
This state of affairs still obtains even after Kaihura's departure. The captured standards of police recruitment have facilitated a mass entrance of military personnel into the lower ranks of the police force as well. Key respondents also noted that the notorious practice dubbed receive and train, an arrangement in which individuals under dubious circumstances through military and political patronage networks or based on formal decisions taken within the military establishment. The appointment of military personnel to directorship positions with no additional training on policing roles, skills and functions has created frustration among trained and career police officers who are now able to receive effective supervision on practical aspects of their policing work, no mentorship on professional policing, the study reveals. In the highly politicized context, police personnel in turn feel unable to confidently advise their military superiors on proper procedures to be taken in technical operations which have due process considerations, reads part of the study. As a result, military personnel have in some cases compromise police investigations through mismanagement of crime scenes, chain of evidence, amongst others.
When these rebels of the NRA emerged from the bush and they discovered to their horror that the Obote II military intelligence establishment and the intelligence service called the National Security Agency, NASA, had a lot of files on these people. Their meetings in Nairobi, in Luweero and different places, and that sort of freaked them out. And also the Uganda police had an intelligence branch or intelligence department called the Special Branch, which was created in the 1950s by the British and which still had strong roots in Uganda. There's always that feeling of a powerful intelligence gathering agency not under my direct control equals a threat to me. So sometime I think 2006, he officially disbanded the Special Branch, which I guess is some of the reason why crimes in Uganda these days are difficult to investigate.
While some police officers resolved to resign from the force out of frustration of this militarization and politicization, others have stayed and fallen in line with the web of capture for the sake of their own career survival.
Deployment of the army officers in the police is undermining the doctrine of the police. Secondly, it is undermining the morale of the police officers who are there. And I know some of the police officers have already decided to ask for retirement prematurely because they don't see the future.
A more critical consequence of the foregoing capture of the force at both the command and recruitment levels is the control of the police in the critical areas of arrests and detention and crowd management and riot control.
But I have raised this matter already with the president. I have written to him a long letter which has got legal implications of deploying the army in the police. In the first place, I know that deployment of the army in the police is devaluing the police.
The riots in town, and they say about the top water that vow. You're inviting us. What do? You want to create law and order. The police has been overwhelmed, inevitably, because it's within Article 209 of the Constitution to support civil authorities. So it's within our mandate. I've noticed there are some individuals who would have loved this country to be a failed state, even within our body politic.
When I was still within the force, the police was involved in the, should I say, inner ring when it came to policing over the electoral process. Now, UPDF would be called in to support general security. And I suppose that's still the issue. That could still be the method. That UPDF is called in to support the police, especially with the outer ring activities of the electoral process. But how they do it, I really don't have the details. Now, whether they could do without UPDF getting involved, it would be a tall order, really.
An observable feature of this control through capture is the phenomenon of orders from above. These instructions usually deviate from formal policing standards and often involve human rights violations, including extrajudicial killings, torture, disappearances, amongst others, but for which there is no commensurate accountability for the victims of these riots. The study recommends for a professional unit trained to deal exclusively with public order management and riot control. Any joint Uganda Police Force and UPDF operations must be closely regulated by law. Such regulation could clearly designate applicable protocols where it is deemed necessary to deploy the UPDF in cooperation with a civilian authority in emergency situations or natural disasters, or in aid to the civil authority in case of a riot or a likely disturbance of the peace, the study reads in part. The study also recommends that the Police Act should be amended to secure the tenure of the IGP and Deputy IGP by designating a specific term in office on a renewable or non-renewable basis. The law should also enumerate the grounds and procedure of their removal from office. The other recommendations include reforms in the recruitment, promotion, and training of police officers and establishing a specialized civilian oversight body for the police whose independence is constitutionally guaranteed. The study says that the prospects for reversing the military capture of the Uganda police force, as enabled through formalized militarization, would require law reform. Strategic and public interest litigation, coupled with activism, advocacy, research, and documentation, should be undertaken to ensure justice for the victims and families killed and maimed during riots. The study says for these reforms to work, it would require a broader and long-term democratization agenda, particularly aimed at the stabilization of civil-military relations and checking the powers of the presidency generally.